Welcome to The Gabrielle Lara Show, a podcast dedicated to normalizing the messy middle of entrepreneurship. I am your host, Gabrielle Lara, and I invite entrepreneurs from all walks of life onto this podcast to share what they navigated to get from where they were to where they are now. My hopes of this podcast is to help you feel more seen and heard in your entrepreneurial journey as you navigate your own version of the messy middle. I appreciate you so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Hello, Lindsay. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited. So for everyone listening, we hopped on. I use something called Zencaster, and I hopped on, and I'm like, Lindsay, where are you from? Because I haven't met Lindsay before, but we have a connection in common. And she's like, well, I'm from Rhode Island, but I live in Massachusetts. And I'm like, wait, I just bought a house in Rhode Island, and I'm from Massachusetts. So come to find out, guys, this is so crazy. She grew up in the town that I just bought a house in. And I've literally never met anyone. We live in Cumberland, Rhode Island, anyone wondering. I have never met anybody from Cumberland.
Yeah, it's like the randomest small town ever. And I cannot believe that you live there. It's hilarious to me.
This is just such
Which
a
means we
world.
also live like 20 minutes away from each other because I live in Attleboro, which is very close to Cumberland.
Oh my gosh. Well, we're 100% gonna have to meet up and get drinks. I wish if I knew I would have done this in person.
I know, right?
But anyways, guys, so small world, but I'm so excited. And I had to stop myself when I was talking to Lindsay before we were pressing record. I wanted to be like, what is your story? Like, what do you do? And then I was like, don't ask, because you don't want to spoil it for the podcast.
Gotta save the juicy stuff for the podcast.
100%. So everyone listening, I'm going to introduce Lindsay in a second, but the purpose of today's episode is to really dive into Lindsay's story and where Lindsay was, where Lindsay is now, what her business is, and all of the messy middle that she had to navigate in between. So hopefully her story helps you feel seen and heard as you're navigating your messy middle. So Lindsay, I am just going to pass it right on over to you. Like, introduce yourself and tell us your story.
Yeah, so first of all, messy middle would be a great title for my autobiography someday.
Right. Like your middle name.
Like that basically describes the past 3 years of me trying to build this business.
Right.
So I am an online business coach. I am a freelance social media manager, and I also host my own podcast called Quit Your Job, Sis. And the way that I got here, so I used to be an accountant. I went to school for accounting. I actually got my master's specialized in tax accounting. I got my CPA license. And then I started my accounting job. I started my job at one of the big 4 public accounting firms in July of 2017. And pretty quickly realized that I did not enjoy accounting. I did not enjoy the work. It wasn't something that felt fulfilling to me at all. And I also just didn't love the corporate work environment of, the 9 to 5. It felt very mundane to me. It felt like I was going through the motions every day, and I wasn't actually like living and enjoying my life. And so within a year, I had already started thinking about what else could I do instead, because I do not want to do this for the next 40 years of my life. And so that was kind of my quarter life crisis, as I call it, where I would come home from work and literally just be like sitting on my floor crying because of how miserable I was. And I knew I had to do something different. So at the time, I was really into fitness. I had been on my own fitness journey for, I want to say, like 3 years. And I was at a point where I was like making workout plans for my friends and like helping them with nutrition advice and things like that. And I was like, maybe I could be a fitness coach. Like maybe I could be a personal trainer. And when I looked into it, all I had to do was take like this self-study course, it would take a few months for me to get a personal training certification, and then I would be certified to train people. And I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I'd be so fulfilled by that. I would feel like I'm helping people every single day, and I would love to do that. And I knew that I would make less money doing that, most likely, but I did not care because I wanted to be happy and love what I was doing. So, a year after I started my job, I enrolled in that program. And then over the next few months, while I was still working, I was studying for my personal training certification. And I was kind of getting the ball rolling with my business because I knew that I wanted my business to be online. Like, I didn't want to go be a personal trainer in a gym and have to be restricted by somebody else's schedule again. I wanted the freedom of having an online business, and I saw other online fitness coaches, and I was like, if they can do it, I've got to be able to do this, right? And now it wasn't that easy. I had like multiple existential crises on the way to deciding I was just going to jump all into my online business, which we could get into. But ultimately, I decided I am just going to start this thing as an online fitness coaching business. I had not trained anyone in person before that. And I was scheduled to take my exam and get my certification. I think it was December 13th of 2018. So come Thanksgiving of 2018, about a month before then, after that long weekend break, I was dreading going back to work. I was like, I cannot do this for another day. And I decided I was going to put in my 2 weeks then. Like, my original plan was quitting maybe in like January or March, saving up a little bit more money, making sure I got my certification, right? But I just decided now is the time. And I'm not actually going to be any more ready 4 months from now than I am right now, other than a piece of paper that says I'm certified to coach you, right? So I went in the next morning and I put in my 2 weeks. And then the first thing I did after that was hire a business coach because I knew I had no idea what I was doing. I did end up passing that exam and getting certified. In January of 2019, I launched my first fitness coaching program, and I signed 5 clients in that first month. By the way, all I was using was Instagram. I didn't have a website. I had like 200 followers, maybe. And that's all I was using when I started my business, which looking back is kind of crazy. I think I signed on another 3 clients in February as well. And that's kind of how this whole business started. Since then, it has had multiple evolutions into life coaching, now business coaching, and also social media management as of last year when I started doing that. I started my podcast in the beginning of 2020. But that is basically the summary of how I got here.
That is so cool. So I want to like dive into all of that.
Yeah.
So like first thing I want to talk about are the pivots that you did,
Hmm.
right? Because you started in fitness and then you went to life and now you're in business coaching and social media management. So
Yes.
walk us through, because a huge conversation in my community is pivoting your business,
Hmm.
right? So walk us through like how you knew it was time to pivot, what that looks like, and what you like face doing that? Like, was it easy for you? Was it challenging?
Yeah, it was scary. The scariest one was the first pivot when I pivoted from fitness coaching to life coaching. But the reason why I knew that it was time to pivot is because I started to feel about my business the way that I was feeling in my corporate job. Meaning,
Yeah.
I was starting to like kind of feel burnt out and like dreading doing what I was doing. Like, it felt like I kind of lost that passion I had for fitness, I guess. And I was like, it was scary because I was like, I just quit my job and started this business to be a fitness coach. And now I don't want to do that anymore. And it was only like not even a year into my business at that point. But I was
Yeah.
feeling really called to coach people on more than just, their physical wellness. Like, I really wanted to help people with their overall mindset, and especially in the area of their job, because I knew there were so many people who were stuck where I was. and wanting to do something different and having all of those doubts and all of those fears, or trying to figure out what that thing would even be. And that's what I wanted to help them with. But it was a scary transition to make because, like I said, I had built this whole business thinking I was going to be a fitness coach forever. And only a year into it, I wasn't really feeling called to do that anymore. um and every pivot is a little bit scary. It's easier now because I trust myself more, because I've also learned so much about building a business. Like, I knew how i I knew how to market myself and build a brand and get clients online from having to figure out how to do that when I was a fitness coach. So I knew that I could translate all those same skills into life coaching and get clients as a life coach, which I did. And now I know how to do that as a business coach. It's what I help my clients do as a social media manager. So, every step along the way, you learn more and you get better at the technical skills of building a business, which is going to help you no matter what type of business you have. So if you're feeling called to do something different, I'd say follow that. There's a reason why you want to do that, and you can trust yourself. And it's also going to be easier. Like, you're not starting over from scratch. You're starting from a place where you've already learned so much about marketing, branding, selling, like everything that you've learned in your first evolution of your business, you can apply to the next one. Um, and I just think I'm the type of person who my interests, I guess, change very quickly. So almost every year I'm doing something different in my business. But that's part of why I have a business, because I didn't want to sign up to do one thing for my entire life.
Right. Right. And something that really stuck out to me, and I literally wrote it down. You guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, you probably see me taking notes and circled it. And you said, like, I trusted myself more.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that. Like, was that a journey for you? And like, how did you know when you had that trust with yourself? Because I think sometimes, like, we trust ourselves, but to actually have that self awareness of being like, oh shit, I trust myself. Like, I can do
Yeah.
this, right? And like, really like hyping yourself up. There's such a difference there. So, like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it is scary, and it's still something that I struggle with when I am making those pivots. I still have that phase of like, is this the right decision? Like, can I actually trust
Absolutely.
myself, right? But
So normal.
to me, trusting myself means knowing that I can always follow that intuitive pull and it's never going to lead me wrong. And I
Absolutely.
have so much evidence of that now, right? The biggest one being when I quit my job because I was feeling so called to do something different. And I was like, honestly, if I can do that, like, I can I can figure it out, right? And now through building my business, which we can also get into the messy middle of that, right? I have seen myself get to my lowest of lows and pull myself out of it. So
Yeah.
I know at the end of the day, I've got my own back. I'm going to figure it out. No matter what happens, I'm going to be good. And I think part of that is something I've built over time, just in the process of building this business. But it's also a decision that I make to trust myself and trust my intuition. And it almost feels like I have to, because I know that pull isn't going to go away if I ignore it. And so it kind of reaches a point where I'm like, if I don't follow this thing that I feel called to do, then it's just going to be in the back of my mind every day forever. So I need to just do it.
I feel like you are so self aware, like,
Yes.
so self aware. I don't hear that often, and I think that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Like, and especially as a CEO, like, you bet on
Mhm.
yourself. You took massive bets on yourself. You probably left a really cushy salary and just said, see ya, and started, just took a bet on yourself,
Yeah.
was like, I will figure it out. And, you're probably in your younger 20s doing that, and that's ballsy
Mhm.
because everyone tells you that's the worst thing you can do. Look at the
Yeah.
benefits you have. Look at the matching 401k. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I will wrap that times 1,000
Yeah.
on my own,
Yeah.
right? It's like, you know, and the fact that you did that, like, were you getting backlash from people when they knew that you were going to quit your job, or like, how did that work
Honestly,
for
I
you?
think most of the people in my life were more supportive than I expected. I
That's
wouldn't say I
awesome.
got backlash. I'd say my parents were maybe a little bit concerned for me, as they probably should have been, like,
Right. Absolutely.
naturally. I think, my
Yep.
dad probably pointed that out, and some people, when I tell them, it tends to be people in older generations who, like, just
Mhm.
fully the only thing they knew was, like, a 9 to 5 job. So I get it. That's
Right.
always their first question of, like, "Well, how are you covering your retirement or your health insurance?" And I'm like,
What about your health
yeah.
insurance? I'm like,
I'm
"Oh,
like,
lordy,
you can do that
please."
on your own, like, but anyway.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
did get a few questions or comments like that, but I was surprised that the overwhelming response I got was, like, people being supportive and encouraging and kinda looking to me as an inspiration, because I think it's something that a lot of people think about doing, but they never actually do.
Right, right. A lot of people aspire to do it. And I think too what you said about like your intuition and like if you did not listen to that, because like I feel like for you, are you a spiritual person at all?
Yes, I would say so.
I can because like well, I am and I can hear a lot of it of like your intuition and like it's that inner guidance system and like you are just really out of alignment and like you have the self-awareness to tell like when
Mhm.
something's just not aligned anymore. Like that ship has sailed. We did what we had to do here during like this phase of our life and now it's on to the
Yeah,
next one. And you
absolutely.
just like bet on yourself each time. And for everyone listening, like I really want you to like absorb that because people make it look so easy, but I'm sure that inner work that you had to do to really fight against your inner bully that's probably like what are you doing? Like you
Oh,
are like
you should see
all
all of my journals from the past 3.5 years. Like,
you save your
yeah, I
journals.
actually did a podcast episode a while ago where I was reading, like, journal entries I wrote from that time when I was, like, quitting my job. So
Oh,
if you wanna hear that, check out my podcast, but I should do another one of
so
those, an updated one.
you should make
But
that
yeah, I've kept all
series.
my journals ever since I was, like, in high school.
It's so important, and I recommend that for everyone, like, to just, like, feel like you're having like, navigating a tough part in your life, in your business, whatever, and you pick up a
Mhm.
journal from a point where maybe you were more miserable or you were navigating
Yeah,
even more, and you're like, "You know what? If I can make it through that, I can kick the shit out
yeah,
of this in the best way possible," because, like, that's just what I do, and it's like, that's where that confidence comes from, and I think it is so inspiring how much you listen to your intuition and you didn't
yeah.
ignore it because the easy thing would be to ignore
I
that.
know. Well, for me, it felt so hard to ignore it because I was just miserable every day. But I think part of it was having confidence in myself, not because I had any idea what I was doing, but it was just this underlying sense of like, I know I'm going to figure it out no matter what. And I knew I wasn't going to let myself get to a point where like I can't pay my bills. Like, and I'm living
Right.
on the street. Like, I'm not going to let myself get there. So if I tried this and it didn't work, then I would go back and get another job. Like, when I really thought about what's the worst case scenario here, it was like very obvious that it was at least worth trying.
100%, 100%. And it's like, and that right there, like, I'm not going to let myself not be able to pay
Right.
my bills. Like, if there's a will, there's a way, and I figure it out. And like, that's the grit and the resilience that I talk about all the time, guys. Like, that's what it takes to become an
Mhm.
entrepreneur. And so often, as like newer entrepreneurs, like, we're faced with something that absolutely sucks. And we're like, okay, we're done
Yeah.
and we backtrack and we retreat and sometimes that's the universe testing you of being like how badly do you really
Oh,
want it
yeah.
like are you going to take it to the next level and really prove to yourself that come hell or high water you will figure this
Yeah.
out and so I want to hear so tell us about because you mentioned before like the messy of starting your business so walk us through that because I'm happy to share my
Yeah,
own too
I was
because
gonna say I have plenty of stories I can share, especially from the first year in my business. I mean, the
yeah
first couple months were great. Like, I signed on 8 clients those first 2 months, like I said, and then after that, it kind of, I guess, plateaued. Like, I was really struggling to sign on any more clients, and I didn't really know what I was doing wrong. And then I would have a good month and then a bad month, like the regular entrepreneurial roller coaster.
yeah
Um, and looking back, I'm like, it's so obvious. I'm like, my audience was tiny. I'm like, I had already talked about my program to all my 200 followers. Like, I just needed to get more visibility, but that's not what I was focusing
Right.
on. So looking back, I can see why things weren't working so clearly, but in the moment,
Mhm.
it was a struggle, you know, and I was still learning about business. Um and I think towards the end of that first year was when I really started to lose that trust in myself a little bit and feel like, can I really do this? Like, is this something that's going to be sustainable? I think I had gone, I mean, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I know I had a few months where I was struggling to get clients. Maybe I got one or two. And then I remember December of 2019, which was like a year into my business, I had signed on a client, and this was after I switched to life coaching. So it was a life coaching client who paid in full, like ready to start this program. And I was so excited. And then the next day she messaged me and she backed out. And
Yeah.
I felt like I had failed. And I felt like, because I was at that point
Yeah.
after a year where I no longer had any of the savings that I had when I left my job. And I literally did not know how I was going to pay my bills unless I got more clients. So it was like crushing. And I had a few mental breakdowns over it. And then I got resourceful, you know. That was actually when I first kind of started doing social media management, but all I did was I
Mhm.
opened a gig on Fiverr to help people optimize their LinkedIn profiles, because that was something that I had done really successfully in my business, using LinkedIn for lead generation as a life coach. Um, and so, I mean, I say really successfully. I was struggling to get clients, but LinkedIn was the thing where most of my clients were coming from. So I knew it was something I could help people with.
Mhm.
So I opened that gig on Fiverr, and that helped. Like, I was just doing all these random things basically to make extra money so that I could pay my bills. And I can't tell you how many times I was like, I don't know how I'm going to like pay my rent next month. But then the money
Yeah.
always showed up. There was literally one time that I will never forget where I was planning on calling my dad to ask him for money or something, because I was like, I don't have the money literally to pay my rent like next week. And I had a call scheduled with someone who was one of my fitness coaching clients. And I also was just like friends with her. So it wasn't necessarily a sales call for life coaching, but it was just kind of a check-in call with her. And long story short, by the end of that call, she had signed up for life coaching with me and paid in full for 3 months. And then I had the money to pay my bills the next month, and I never had to make that call to my dad. So that's kind of how the first year of my entrepreneurial journey was in a lot of ways. But then really ever since then, it kind of evened out. I ended up hiring my own life coach. I got really into like money mindset, and I took some courses on that. And pretty much since then my income has been steady. You know, as a life coach, as a business coach, as a social media manager now. And but yeah, I mean, there were so many times where I could have given up, where I could have said, this isn't working, and this is too hard, and I'm not cut out for this, and I should just go back and get a job. There were times where I was applying for part-time jobs because I didn't know that whether I was going to make enough money with this business. But the universe was like, no, you don't need a part-time job. You can figure it out. And here we are.
It's scrappy. I just looked at the clock, Lindsay. This is bizarre. I just looked at the
Yeah.
clock and it was 3:33 as you were finishing. That's insane. Um, it gets scrappy, and you did, and because like in my head as you were finishing up there before the
Yeah.
333 distracted me, I was like, I feel like the big turning point in this story is when you said
Yeah.
I got resourceful. And I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I meet who are like, I had to
Mm-hmm.
get resourceful. Like the guy, oh, what the hell's his name? Who created John Paul? Is that the shampoo? I'm trying to remember. The guy who started like the John Paul,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Paul Mitchell. It's Paul Mitchell. Sorry, Paul Mitchell shampoo. He was literally living in his car with
Mm-hmm.
his 2-year-old son, trying to get this business off the ground, was going door to door. And now look at him. He owns like a tequila. I don't know if he's the one who owns Patron.
Oh,
He owns
really?
some, he's like a multi
Dang.
millionaire. Like crazy. And it's like he was living out of his car with his 2-year-old
Yeah.
son, right? And it's like you get scrappy, you get resourceful, and it's so common. I'm so glad that
Mm-hmm.
you shared that, Lindsay. I'm so glad, because people make it seem like start your
Yeah.
business, you get clients. You're
Yeah.
good. You're good. You're good. You got it. And so when all of us, like I always share, I didn't make money in my
Yeah.
business for 6 months. I was laid off of my job. Eric was laid off his job 48 hours later. We were living in New Mexico. Our whole family was in Massachusetts. Bills up the yin yang. Thank God that we
Mm-hmm.
had savings, right? And it's just like that was in April 2020 when the whole
Yeah.
world was going to shit. And it was terrifying, so much uncertainty. And for 6 months, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
make a single dollar. A single dollar. But that experience is what led me to
Yeah.
do what I do today. I didn't know
Exactly.
my niche. And now that's what I help people figure out. Like, I didn't know who I was talking to. And it's just so crazy how these experiences like shape us into who
Mm-hmm.
we are today. And it's like that's like a huge part of your story, I feel like, at least from what I've taken away of
Yeah.
what you've been saying. Like that is a really
Yeah.
relatable piece because so many people struggle. Like you probably saw me
Yeah.
smiling the whole time. I'm like, yes. Finally, somebody who hasn't been like, I made $100,000 savings off my
Yeah.
business. It's like, no, stop bullshitting us because you didn't. And it's like, I shared a post on Instagram today, and it was a win from one of my clients, and it had nothing to do with the money she made. She's just getting her business off the ground, and she finally found a way to sell
Mm-hmm.
that works for her. And she, hosted an event, and 5 people came. As a new business owner, do you know how
Yeah.
freaking big that is? It is hard to get people to go to your in like
Yeah.
in an event. Please get 5 people with barely any community. Like that is unfreaking heard of. And it's like those are the baby steps it
Mm-hmm.
takes to like get your first high paying client. You don't just jump out of the woodworks and it's like, oh, here it is. Here's $5,000 I'm
Yeah.
ready to give you. It's like baby steps, and like let's normalize the baby steps. And I love that you just did that. That got me
Yeah.
fired up.
No, I do. I don't share that enough, probably. But I do like to share that story because, yeah, I mean, yes, I did sign
Huge.
5 clients in my first month, but that doesn't mean that was what every month of my business looked like, you know?
Absolutely. And like normalize the fact that like months
Yeah.
just aren't steady. Like I feel like and you can definitely make them steady 100%, but as an entrepreneur, there's going to be
Yeah.
months where you're not making a dollar.
Especially in your
And it's like
first
if
year,
you're
like, it's so normal.
yeah, like the first few years, like
Mhm.
get comfortable with that and get ready to get
Yeah.
freaking scrappy because like it happens. It's happened to me. It is normal. I'm sure
Yeah.
it's happened to you. Like it happens, and it's like just get scrappy. And there's like
Mhm.
it's very
It
humbling.
for
It's a very
sure is,
humbling
yeah.
experience. I think it's really important for everyone to go through. Um, okay, so thank you so much for sharing that. So I have 2 questions left that I want to ask you. So first question is, what is one thing that you wish you could go back and tell yourself at the start of your
You know what's so
business?
funny? I like literally had a moment last night where I was like basically doing this internally. I was like, what would I what does
Mhm.
my past self need to
Yeah.
hear? Because I feel like what what I would have told myself in the beginning of my business, I'd say especially in those points where like I was struggling to sign clients is like really put it in perspective and focus
Mhm.
on how far you've come, because I think we can get so caught up in comparing ourselves to these people who, made 6 figures in year 1, whether that was true or not, or have built a 7 figure business, or talk about 5 figure months and feel like we're behind when we're literally just starting. Like, we can look at
Right.
somebody else who's been
Right.
doing this for 10 years and feel like that's where we should be on day 1. And so
Mhm.
remembering to put in perspective where you're at, like, I didn't make a lot of money in the first year of my business, but I learned so much about marketing and selling and branding and social media marketing, and that helped me to get into that next phase of my business and to start seeing the success that I wanted. So just kind of like stay in your own lane. Don't compare yourself to somebody else's timeline because we're all on a different timeline. And trust yourself and keep going.
100%. Somebody was on the podcast recently and she said, like, somebody's blessings does not mean that,
Mhm.
they're going to be your blessings too. And it's so easy to compare, right? It's so easy to be like, why can't I figure it out? What is she doing right? And I'm not. Like,
Yeah.
different timelines. I love how you just said that. It is different timelines. Everyone has like a different fate. And you are, as long as I always say, like, as long as you're
Mhm.
operating in alignment, like you're gonna get there. You will get there. And if you're not operating in alignment, just like what happened to Lindsay, your intuition
Yeah.
will beat the crap out of you until you. Like, it's not going away. It's not like
Yeah.
you can ignore me. It's like, no, like one way or
Yeah,
the
I
other, it's happening. So,
definitely
if you
feel
want to
like the universe was guiding me too. Like, sometimes I think back and I'm like, maybe the reason why I struggled so hard to sign fitness clients toward the end, like, it was because I didn't want to be doing fitness coaching anymore. And the universe was basically like, no, you're not going to make money in this way because it's not what you actually want. And I was just lying to myself because I was
right,
scared to pivot into life coaching. So of course I wasn't signing fitness coaching
right.
clients. I didn't actually want them anymore, you know? So looking back, I can see more clearly how it all came together and how everything I learned from each evolution of my business is helping me to get closer to where I'm going. And like, if it had just worked from day one, I wouldn't have learned everything that now allows me to be a social media manager and be a coach for other people, you know? So it definitely was a
Mhm.
gift from the universe that it didn't work from day one. But it can be hard to feel
Mhm.
that way when you're in it.
Oh, 100%. It's so and
Yeah.
it's, like, annoying to hear that too. You're like, "Shut up." Like, just give me money, like, get out of it, and, like, it can be really frustrating, but I find that once you get through it and you pause and you look back and you're like, "Damn,
Mhm.
I did that.
Yeah.
I did that." And, even if you didn't get the $5 million overnight like everyone does, like, you did that, and that is badass. That is badass as anything. The amount of times I was on mute, I don't know if you guys know that, I was telling Lindsay, I was like, I mute myself a lot so I don't
Mhm.
just, like, interject constantly, but when you were telling your story, I was like, "Badass. Badass. Badass. When you took that plunge, badass. When you walked in there and you're like, 'Nah, I'm done.' Badass. And that you bet on yourself, badass. You didn't make money for a few months and you kept
Yeah.
going, badass. So much of it. And we just don't give ourselves enough credit.
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like
We
especially
definitely
women,
do
we're just not good
not.
at that. So how can people get in touch with you? What's your podcast? How can people work with you and
Yes,
where
my
can they find you?
podcast is called Quit Your Job, Sis. You can find it pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. I'd probably start there. I talk more about my story. I share what I've learned, share marketing tips, and I also interview a ton of other entrepreneurs to share their story and their tips for you as well. And then I'm on Instagram at Lindsay M. Hanson, TikTok at Lindsay M. Hanson, and my website is lindsayhanson.com, where you can see more about any of my programs. If you want to apply for coaching, you can go to lindsayhanson.com/apply. But yeah, I would check out the podcast and then come hang out with me on Instagram. That's pretty much where I hang out the most.
Cool. I'm going to put everything in the show notes, guys. So just head below to the show notes, click along, and go follow Lindsay. Go find her on TikTok and Instagram and listen to her podcast. I
Yay!
cannot wait to start listening to it.
Thank you
Thank
for
you so much
having
for joining
me.
me. Did you enjoy today's episode? If so, I would be super appreciative if you left a review and a rating and shared this with a friend so that I can continue to bring you value every single week. I'll see you next time.